Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We're really excited today to talk to Winnie.
Winnie is going to come to us with a challenge that is probably relatable to many of you, which is that she left her well-paying, stable job to work ultimately twice as much and make half as much. And that is obviously not her goal. So we're going to dive in with her to understand the background of her story, her business, and what some of her major takeaways are, which we will make sure that you get really clearly at the end as well.
Yeah, so if that's something that you find relatable or something you're interested in, definitely listen on because we have a couple of key takeaways that we think are really important for a myriad of businesses. So if any of that's of interest to you, definitely stay tuned.
This is Your Business Hotline, where we take calls and answer questions from real business owners to help them design a business that works for the life they want.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Dara.
And together we have more than 25 years of business building experience that we are ready to share with you. Want an unusual glimpse behind the curtain of these companies? Let's get into it.
Well, hey, Kate, we've got Winnie on the line.
I know. I'm excited to talk to Winnie. Winnie, if you want to share with us a little bit about your business and why you're here to chat with us today, that would be amazing.
Hey, thank you so much for having me and just for taking my question today. So my issue is that I started my business for freedom, but now I find myself working 2 times as harder and not making as much of what I need, especially in this economy.
Absolutely.
We get that.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about your business and some background so we and our callers or our listeners can understand.
Yeah, so back in 2017, I started a subscription box-based business, actually with my son, known as Books and Bros. And we've been able to sustain this business since then, really with no problems. We've been handling it as a grassroots organization, and we haven't even had to have the need or the ask of inviting in investors. But now, for the first time in now 7 years, I find myself looking at options for capital and getting investments from, stakeholders that would be within our industry. And that's just never been something that I really felt the need to consider until now. But the cost of living is different now. The cost of operating a business seems, much more expensive now, so I'm just trying to figure out how to continue to be able to sustain.
Okay, that's interesting because we're a lifestyle-led, business-led podcast, and I know that that's how you've been running this business until now. So for anyone who's considering making a leap from doing it on their own, self-financing, to bringing in investors or other types of capital, that in some ways, shapes, and forms creates a new boss and can in some ways alter that idea of a lifestyle-led business. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the reason that you're now considering bringing on an investor or some sort of capital outside of self-funding and just reinvesting in whatever revenues have come into the business, it sounds like it's because you're hitting a wall. And I'm wondering if that wall is actually connected to sales and that really it's a question of how do we bring more revenue into the business so we can continue to fund its generation, its being there in the first place, let alone fund what you and your family need to continue to operate it. Is that appropriate?
Yes, that's spot on. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention a lot of changes that have happened. So in starting this business, we were originally living in St. Louis, Missouri, which the cost of living is a lot lower there, regardless of what the economy looks like. And we moved to Atlanta, Georgia during the pandemic. But also during the pandemic, I got pregnant. And so, there's been a lot of changes just as far as relocating and then also adding another mouth to feed to the household. And I've even noticed with my physical capacity, it's not who I used to be a few years ago, so those are the extra layers to this as well.
So Winnie, tell us a little bit, if you had a magic wand and you could decide how much time you spend in your business and how much money it brings you in terms of salary. So after expenses and taxes and what have you, what would those two numbers look like? How many hours would you work maybe a week in your business? And then how much would you be taking home?
Yeah, so I'm really firm on trying to have some type of work-life balance and having time for my family as well as to be the business owner that I am and create and enjoy the business that we built. So I would say, as far as hours, I'm okay with 40 hours a week. Like I'm okay with that and having the weekends to myself, unless it's like an event or something of that nature. And as far as salary after taxes and business expenses, I think I would be okay. I would prefer like at least 90K. But that feels far-fetched in this moment.
What are you bringing home now from the business?
Right now, it's been a lot slower, so we're barely hitting like 45K.
In total gross revenue?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And is there revenue coming in from anywhere else? If I'm not mistaken from a previous conversation, I believe that you had worked in communications and or PR.
Yes. So with operating in this business, we've been very fortunate to have some great media opportunities. And in that, I didn't even realize that I was operating as his publicist. I just thought that I was being a great mom who sacrificed leaving her 9 to 5.
Yeah.
To be a part of this. And my mom actually has a history of working in communications. And when I would tell her the type of situations that I was managing and, just pushing through, not only for my son, but just for the business that we've built overall, my mom was like, Winnie, you're operating as like publicist, director of communications, all of those things. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, so when I noticed, obviously, after I had the baby, I took some time, recently for myself just to make sure that I was okay. But obviously, going through inflation and post-pandemic, life looked different and we had to start being creative as far as how we would bring more money in as a family. And my husband, thankfully, he works, a 9 to 5. But I guess I'm just like a hustler at heart. So there's never too much money to have in the household. And so I have started my own PR firm where I've been taking on additional clients outside of working with my son.
So the 40 hours a week, would that need to be split between those two endeavors?
I'm at a place where I would invest 40 hours a week for Books and Bros, for the book club, and I would minimize my time with PR. I'm also at a place, like when I say work-life balance, I want to fully enjoy where I'm placing my time as well. So if that means that I'm doing PR part-time, if it's 10 or 20 hours, a month, for those kind of low maintenance clients, then I'm fine with balancing the two. But I would much more prefer to, keep it at a full-time rate as far as like my time for Books and Bros.
Talk to us about how you've garnered business in Books and Bros historically. Talk also about what the most common purchase is someone has and what the lifetime customer value is if you know it, meaning what's the average length of time someone stays on the subscription if that's the thing that they're most often subscribing to? Is it a monthly option? Is it the 6 month? Is it an annual? And, what are the numbers there?
Yeah. So I guess in total, we've served over 800 boys internationally, which, has been great. We actually started to dial back from serving kids internationally just because we learned the hard way about, different service charges.
Yeah.
Operating on a global scale. We would love to impact kids outside of the U.S., but that's just a different profit margin. But yeah, we've served over 800 boys. So originally when we started Books and Bros, we charged $25 a month to ship them a box with a book included, curriculum that I would develop, snacks and swag that complemented that book. So if it's like a mystery story, then we would, like even around like Halloween, we've had a Halloween box. So, they would get candy and popcorn and, just things to make it fun and enjoyable to have this time, to read the book. And in addition to the book, we would also host monthly book club meetups. And so, I learned on the back end that $25 a month would not cover
That's right.
all of these costs, plus giving us, a profit. So we were able to stretch that as far as we could. But during the pandemic, we took a huge loss because there were so many things with the post office having issues and not delivering packages and losing packages. We lost thousands of dollars in refunds because people were upset and, people were very, that's when people started to pinch their pennies, so they're like, I didn't get this and I didn't get that. Or, there was not much grace given to business owners. I don't feel like during that time, at least not with us. So there was a lot of, trying to keep the customer happy, which meant giving them refunds. And obviously since then, we've also revisited having a shipping policy that would protect not only the customer, but us as well. But yeah, I would say, like, in addition to all of that, we also, eat the cost of books. So, the first few years of operating Books and Bros, we had a really great partnership with a local bookstore where, in exchange for, using our platform and promoting their brand and helping them grow, we would get books donated from them for our boys. But the more that we grew, obviously that's harder to, meet a balance with that. So over the last, I would say 3 years has been the most that we've had to spend on books. And even Sydney, my son, he learned at a young age, he's like, wait, if I pick out this book that's $15, now that means we're spending $15 times how many people?
Plus shipping, plus time.
Yeah, and that's just on the book.
Right. So let's jump forward. So right now, if I'm not mistaken, according to your website, it's $34 a month, correct?
Yes.
Great. And what's your average cost per box that you ship to you?
I would say the average cost is probably around $15. So we're, almost meeting a balance when it comes to that profit margin.
So you've got about a 55% margin.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the average amount of time that a customer subscribes for?
Well, that's also been a shift as well. Before 2020, they would stay with us literally at minimum 2 years. Like, we have really loyal customers. Now, because we've been in such a shift and a change, we're lucky if we keep them for 6 months. So I know that a lot of that is on our end regarding marketing and consistency, and, just trying to adjust to so many changes.
So your average customer value right now is somewhere in the ballpark of $75, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So based on the goal you have of taking home $90K, do you know how many subscriptions you would need in order to meet that goal after expenses and taxes and everything? Do you have that number?
I don't. I should have.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, I think that a lot of times that can be the thing that's helpful in a lot of these conversations, whether it's venture capital or what revenue generating tasks we should be focusing on, is actually knowing what ingredients we need to be able to hit that goal that we have. Because I think for many of us, we just think like we need more. like we're not at the place we need to be and we need more. We need maybe double than we've had previously. But I think when we can reverse engineer from our intended goal, then when those become really clear, we can look at that number and say, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 500, maybe it's 1,000. How likely does that feel for us to do on our own or within 40 hours or with a venture capitalist? And then I think that can start to paint a picture really quickly for us about next steps and what needs to be done.
No, that makes so much sense. And it's really helpful. I know that I've needed to have like certain numbers in front of my face. But I think sometimes it's easier having that conversation with like-minded people like you too.
Well, it's interesting. You made the comment about your mom pointing out to you what your skill set really was. And that's why it is really important to surround yourself with people who can mirror to you some of the strengths or areas of opportunity that you might be missing. Because we can get so in the zone and so focused on what we're doing that oftentimes we can't see our own shadow, so to speak. So for you to be able to look at this, like something that you've said to us off camera too, in some information you shared, was that you really didn't know the numbers. And so one, if you were to decide to go seek investment, you're going to need to know those upside down and inside out. Two, my instinct says that's actually just a plug for a hole you're trying to fill, as opposed to what's really going to move you towards what you want, because you've also told us, and please feel free to elaborate, that success for you is really around the well-being and thriving of your family, not necessarily around things that would be driven by venture capital or investors of any sort. And there's a lot that I think they would need to see for the scalability of this, which is going to completely implode a lot of those goals for you. So I really think that an important thing would be to do what I think Kate's getting at, and something that we just have as a core philosophy that we share, which is figure out what it is you want in your life, figure out what that life costs, figure out how much time you want to allocate to this business, and then reverse engineer from there. So you already have so much that is proven in this model that works, and there's a lot of question marks that still exist after 7 years. So I think question one will be, is this going to be a primary source of revenue for me and my family? And or is this going to be ancillary and additional? And or does this become something that's a labor of love that we're doing because we believe in the mission of, I forget what your mantra was, but it was something like about making reading cool. And I think that's
Just amplifying African American literature. Yeah. So our mission is amplifying African American literature and making reading cool for boys.
Yes, which is great. And actually, I would also offer to you in there to say, so that what? Like, what's the reason for that? Because for people who don't already think that reading is cool, like, what's the value in that for them? What are they going to get out of that? We have sort of this equation or formula that we like to use when people don't know how to explain what they do. And I'm not accusing you of that by any means, but it's this concept of I help blank, whoever your audience is, to blank, whatever it is that they want to do, like getting from where they are, where they want to be, so that blank. Meaning, what's the outcome? What's the why? Where is that journey taking them? And how is what you offer through your business getting them from where they are to where they want to be? You say the thing that you always say about what businesses really are, because it's so pertinent right here.
I mean, businesses are ultimately really just entities that give someone something in exchange for money. Like, you're providing value for money. That's all that a business is. I think we like to make it a lot more complex, but ultimately at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's exchanging value for money. And so if we don't have that piece, if we're not really clear on the value, a lot of times the money can be elusive because we're not really sure what we're giving people. And what's funny is it's almost always clear to that person, like they've thought about it subconsciously, they know what it is, but we haven't communicated it in a way where that person realizes, hey, I need this. Like, I need to be investing in this immediately.
Right.
And I think the same goes on the back end. Like, a lot of times we think we want to make more money, we want to have more time, but when we're not concrete about what that looks like, that's when it continues to elude us, or we fall victim to a lot of the things we see on Instagram of like, buy this course, buy this template, listen to this audiobook. And it's like, well, we can do all these things, but if we don't actually know where we're going and like specifically from a numbers perspective, that's when things will continue to stay kind of elusive, or we'll be doing things for the wrong reason.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think ultimately you consistently in any business, especially a business like this, need to be considering, where is the person when I'm coming into their lives digitally, through PR, through whatever. And if they're the right person at the right time, what is the desired outcome they're looking for? What is the problem they're looking to overcome? And how does what we offer immediately intersect that? So I love the saying of, you don't have a vitamin, you have a painkiller. So it's that concept of, how do you create something that when someone shows up on your website and they interact with your brand, they quickly know this is the painkiller that solves the problem that I want to solve. It helps me move closer to the desired outcome that I'm seeking, without question, without hesitation, that it just feels like a no-brainer, that value to them exists. So I think there's that question for you of, how do you make sure you're delivering that? And then two, when we're just looking at your offerings, once we've done that reverse engineering that we've talked about of time, of how much money you want this to make gross and net for you, and all of the components of that, then it's looking at your capital as far as human capital of you, your husband, and your son, who are the core team here, and who's willing to do what, who has what skills to do what, and how do you make that be something that you take whatever is working or could be working and put fuel on top of it. Like, I'm really curious why ads haven't been a thing for you, but when I look at your margins right now, you don't really have margins to do much of anything, which means that there's probably a price point issue, which could be a cost of goods issue and or just a general price point issue. It could be the model as a subscription may or may not be the right thing from a, how do you make sure you're getting the money that you need to supply the value that you're looking to offer consistently? Because something Kate and I talk to a lot of our clients about is, if you can't provide the service without being in a scarcity place for yourself, you're not going to be able to consistently offer that value to your people anyway. So you're doing them a disservice by doing yourself a disservice in the first place. So I'd be using those things to get into that nitty-gritty, not working the way that it sounds like you have been, which is trying to just guess and put your best estimate at, okay, well, what might someone pay and what's the least amount? That is one of our least favorite ways to approach running a business. It's how do I provide the value and what does that need to cost and how do I position it in a way where maybe you don't need as many customers because they're paying more, or you need the same amount of customers, but they come in the door much more easily because whatever customer acquisition arenas or avenues you've chosen, make that clearer because your messaging is clear. It's talking directly to them and their problem set. And like we said, the outcomes that they're seeking. What else would you add?
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add is a lot of times when we do that reverse engineering, we have some illumination like, wow, it takes way too many people to make this a reality in terms of a customer perspective. Or we realize, oh my gosh, it's going to take us way too much time based on our goals to be able to achieve this. And so I love a saying that Sarah Blakely says all the time. She says, don't fall in love with the product, fall in love with the process or the problem. And so, you have a very clear, very important mission and challenge that you're trying to solve for your customers. That doesn't mean that the business is no longer relevant if we can't do that within the, equation that we've set up to reverse engineer. It means we have to find maybe a different way of doing that. And when we start to get creative in that way, that's when that energy and effort spent in your business becomes really valuable. Because if we're just trying to figure out how can we make this thing that we've set up work, sometimes there's a limit to it. But if we say, African-American literacy is super important to us, we have X number of hours to spend on it, and we want to make X, amount of money, what's the best combination of resources we can use to do that? That's a really fun conversation versus like, how are we going to get 10,000 people that don't know about us to know about us and pay this? Sometimes that can be, like Dara said, more of a scarcity mindset than an exciting abundance amplification mindset of like, oh, wow, we could do this a million different ways. If we're spending too much money here, or if the numbers don't make sense, we can still work towards this goal without being committed to this thing that's taking too much time or taking too many resources.
That makes sense. And yeah, you hit so many points. One thing that I have not mentioned, and it's not necessarily a part of the business, but because early on we recognized that we were losing a few of our local members who were actually enjoying like even the in-person meetups, and we couldn't figure out why. So then I started to send out, post testimonials and things like that for their families. And I learned that there were just people having real life problems. So, there would be moms who, maybe she got laid off of her job, or a family was going through a divorce, so their finances look different. And because this is also like a labor of love for us, I didn't want finances to be a reason why these kids didn't have access to what they deserve in the first place. And so I did start a nonprofit arm of this to where we could provide the exact same services completely for free for those who can't afford the subscription cost. And so I believe that has helped us to sustain over time. And now, since we live technically in a new state, in a new city, we're currently working through what the nonprofit model looks like, because we may just have to shift and mostly promote the nonprofit angle as opposed to the for-profit, because this is like a labor of love, and we would like to reach a certain level of sustainability without, like you said, thinking about like, okay, who are 10,000 people that we need to reach today, and we can look at it from a different perspective and say, okay, what aligning organizations or funders, would invest in something like this, knowing that they would get essentially that return back. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that, just as another creative way to sustain.
Yeah, I noticed that on your website, and I think that it demonstrates to me that you're willing to think about things differently and that you're not just married to the way things have been, which is really essential. And I noticed that there's so many options on the website of, fund a month, fund a this, fund a person, fund a whatever, or get it for this long or this long or this long or this long. Kate and I are big fans, especially when you're at these earlier stages of the business where the model of customer acquisition and conversion and retention is not clear and consistent, to have less options, even though that feels like you're probably, like it may just trigger fears of leaving money on the table for you. But ultimately what often is happening. Because when I went on as a theoretical customer for the first time, I was confused. And I was like, what's the clear call to action? What is this really asking? Is this a nonprofit or for-profit? Am I funding someone? Is someone else funding? So I think ultimately when you get some of those fundamental questions answered that we were talking about, that needs to thus inform which is the model of this business. Because either you're going to be a nonprofit or a for-profit, unless you're going to be a public benefit corporation, which is generally both. That's probably a way too complex of a structure for what you need. And if you're going to be a nonprofit, then there's definitely things that you're going to need to continue to bone up on, which it sounds like you are, to make sure you're in compliance. And then there's going to be those questions of the fundamental format of the business, of how important is the in-person stuff versus virtual. Certainly, virtual might have more scalability, in-person's going to have more high touch. And what is the revenue model? And trying to divorce your mindset from less is always better, because especially if you move to a place, for profit or not, where people are like, maybe your business model becomes, I'm not advocating for this, I'm just
hypothetical.
Thinking. Exactly. Just making up prognostes at this point, which is that maybe the business model is we actually have a lot more success asking people to donate $100 or $500 or $1,000, telling them that what that does, again, whether or not it's a nonprofit organization, and then we can just deploy that right back into the community rather than trying to get one-off customers at very small margins per person. So to just be considering, how do you simplify to make sure that your efforts in whatever number of hours you ultimately are spending on this, as well as your husband and your son every week, are focused. Because my feeling right now is that it's scattered and it's sort of grasping at straws a little bit of, well, here's an opportunity and here's another opportunity, here's another opportunity, but we're not really tracking what's effective, what's consistent, what's garnering the most results. And until you know those things and are willing to face the data mixed with, why am I doing this? What do we really want from this? And what are the best vehicles to get us there, both from a business structure, from a formatting of your offer, the pricing of it, so on and so forth. That's when we can get into the more fun stuff of talking to our customers, of getting in front of them through marketing or other means. So while I love that you've been in Forbes and all of these other places, and I'm sure that drove eyeballs and maybe even some sales for some time, those are more the vanity things that we do when they're part of a strategic process and they're part of the step-by-step of, we know when we push this lever, it's going to do this, as opposed to, let me just do this because I don't know what else to do. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, what's paramount in this conversation, it's actually the reason Dara and I started this show, was we don't want to prescribe what business success looks like for anyone. We honestly don't care how much money you make. We don't care the structure of your business. We don't care how much time you have in your business. We care that it aligns with the vision you have for yourself of success. And so if you come home at the end of the day and you're like, actually, we lost money this year, but it totally fulfilled the goal of us impacting more people, or I had the best time in my business and this is a great thing for my son to engage in, that's a win. Like that's absolutely a win. And so I think for us, it's, again, not only knowing those numbers, but knowing like, why are we in this? What's the primary goal? If the primary goal is making money, I guarantee you the business is going to look totally different than if the primary goal is being able to give back to the community. And if we happen to make money, great, or if we happen to have, more time with our family, great. But ultimately, this is that primary goal. That's really how we want people to be structuring their businesses, is based on what success looks like for them. And so again, not only just knowing these numbers, but knowing like, what's the primary thing I need to get out of this? Or what's the
what
primary
are you measuring
goal?
for?
Right. What are we measuring for?
Right. And knowing that impact and profit can coexist. They often
Yes.
should. We are big believers in that. And to Kate's point, you define what success is and race towards that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do us a favor, synthesize for us what your takeaways are and what you're going to do from here.
Yeah, I'm just like taking it all in. So first, I just want to say thank you, because, I think also like sometimes it's just hard looking at the numbers when, it could be an uncomfortable thing. Like talking about money can be uncomfortable, for some people. So I would say taking away from this, definitely the impact and profit can coexist. That I just wrote that down in my notes, because I think that has been a, what's the word? Like, I would say impact and profit can coexist, because I think that coming from a smaller city, where the expectation for your lifestyle is supposed to be you're going to work at the post office and that's it. That never aligned with my vision for my life, even just as a child. So knowing that it's okay, to make a certain amount of money to be able to take care of my family, so that we can be comfortable, but then also that it doesn't necessarily have to be all about the money if impact is at the forefront. So I just having both of those things coexisting is something that is like right on the surface of even just my heart with this, and also making it simplifying the process for the everyday customer, for the people that we may not even know that we're reaching, so that way they can easily understand what we're offering.
Yes.
There's one more thing I want to say to that point, and for anyone listening, in addition to Winnie, it's always easier for a customer to say yes or no than to say which one. And so whenever we're thinking about, even if you limit it to only donations, if they have a bunch of different donation types to choose from, that can also be complex. So every time you have an option for someone to engage with you financially, ask yourself, are they saying yes or no to something, or are they saying which one? Because if they're saying yes or no, it's much more likely that they'll convert versus taking time to think about it. So I wanted to add that as well.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say, Winnie, among many things, is that there isn't one right way. There's just the right way for you. And for you to know what that is and own that, not based on conditioning, by societal expectations, like you said, from your small town, maybe even what it was for you historically, because your life has changed. You've moved, you've had a baby. I think you said you were recently remarried. There's a lot in there that might cause you to redesign what success looks like for you. So while this is top of mind, while we have rattled your brain up a lot, I would highly suggest that you take this and say, I'm going to take this momentum and inertia, and I'm going to sit and be really honest with myself and almost look at it like a blank slate. If I were to start from scratch today, knowing what I know now, how would I design this? Because you have the answers. You just need to give yourself the space to process them and not just keep moving forward because you feel pressured or forced to do that without pausing. Like we love to always say, my brain just left me. Pause. Slow down. No, slow down to speed up. That if you slow down, it gives yourself enough space to process and put the pieces together. And that's where a lot of those downloads come, where you get your best ideas. So we invite you to take that time and space after you hang up or very soon to let this sink in and digest and synthesize how you want that to be for you going forward. So thank you and congratulations to you and your family for what you've built and the, was it 800 lives that you have impacted and probably then some. So congratulations and thank you for sharing so openly with us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We look forward to hearing your update if you'll circle back with us too.
Keep us updated.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Winnie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, I'm grateful to Winnie for sharing so openly with us. Like we said at the top of the show, I'm certain that others are going to relate to her plight, even if their circumstances are different. There's a couple takeaways that I think you're going to hear through the episode. What were some of those, Kate?
Yeah, I think the main takeaway is that you have to know what you're working towards. A business can have so many different types of goals or so many different metrics that are important for success, but you have to know which ones are important for you. We actually start the episode talking about potentially pursuing venture capital. And especially when you're thinking about that, we want to be thinking about, what do we want to achieve anyway? Do we want more cooks in the kitchen? Do we want to be making more money? Do we want to just purely focus on impacting lives? Is it important for us to have more time at home? All of those questions need to be answered for us then to have actionable change in our business. The other thing we talk about, which is something that Dara and I are super passionate about, is that impact and profit aren't mutually exclusive. You can be making a profit and making a difference at the same time. You just have to know that that's what you want to be doing in order to work towards that goal. So I think those are kind of two powerful things that we discuss specifically with Winnie in this episode that are applicable to so many of the businesses we talk to.
Thanks for listening to Your Business Hotline. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate, review, and share with business owners just like you.